Hello, everybody. If we've not met, my name's Laura Ford. I'm the Managing Director for Indeed for Australian operations. I'm absolutely thrilled to get to welcome you all here today at our Indeed offices in partnership with WithYouWithMe, our wonderful partners for today. So we're all here to celebrate National Skills Week. There's a lot going on this week, so thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules and coming in and hanging out with us. Hopefully there's going to be some game-changing ideas. That's the theme of the week, isn't it? I'm going to just start, if I can, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island people present here today or online. We do have a few people online joining us, so welcome to you as well. So we've got a very insightful panel discussion today. We are going to be unpacking a pretty sizable topic with three incredible leaders who have got a lot to say on the topic, but we're going to be talking about how we build a future-ready workforce whilst navigating the future skills revolution in the age of AI. So, yeah, lovely to welcome you here. The session will be recorded as well if you do want to watch it again or to forward to colleagues. And I know that many of you here know us pretty well. You've been on the ride, the Indeed ride with us over the last decade in Australia. But for some of you I've not met before, and you may be a little newer to Indeed. So I would just like to take a few minutes just to tell you a little bit about who we are. Actually, there's some people here that could probably do this presentation. I'm looking at you, very. Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about our company. And I start where we always start, which is with our mission. We help people get jobs. It's a very simple mission. You can see it's on my t-shirt here. It's the reason why I joined the company, and it's what gets us out of bed every single morning and keeps us going all day long. And it really is more than just a slogan on a t-shirt. It's the connection to those people whose lives that we impact every single day, and a mission that I know many of you in the room really resonate with as well. Because for many all around the world, work is more than just a job. It's something that gives us a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. And indeed, we really do firmly believe that when people looking for better opportunities are connected with those that are offering it, the world can work better. And we also recognise that employment and skills are deeply intertwined. And our partners, our wonderful partners WithYouWithMe, have a similar belief, which I really loved, which was that when an individual's career aspirations align with an organisation's goals, both can thrive. So really excited to partner today on this event. I've been wearing this t-shirt for 11 years. Not this one, actually, because it probably wouldn't be fit for purpose now in public. But this is the original OG t-shirt. You can see that it's been through quite a lot. And I like to put this into my presentation because it serves as a reminder to me of all the things that my T and I have been through. So we got to 11 years ago, my T and I got to open the first Sydney office in Australia. So our first office, our operations here locally. We got to hire hundreds of Indeedians together, and then we got to move to bigger and better offices over that time. And we managed also to survive the last few years together with all the crazy stuff that's been going on. And you could say that we've actually learned quite a lot of skills together. I wonder if any of this resonates with you in the room. Resilience and adaptability, that's something that you've had to learn over the last few years. What about remote leadership? We've all learned that, haven't we, over the last few years together. Digital literacy. I don't know about you, but I've become pretty good at triaging Wi-Fi connection issues at home. So if this doesn't work out, part-time IT specialist gig is for me. But yeah, it's been an absolutely incredible 11 years with the team and myself. And the business is actually older than that. So this year, in a couple of months, we celebrate our 20-year anniversary as a company. So that's 20 years spent trying to figure out how we connect people to better work. Indeed, we really do have an incredible front row seat now to the world of work. We now help more than 350 million job seekers connect with 3.5 million employers every single month. It's an incredible number. And here in Australia, we actually help 12.8 million job seekers They trust us to find work on the Indeed and Glassdoor platforms every single month. And we currently have 4.2 million job seekers in Australia that are open to finding work. So if you want to go and search for specific skills or certifications and employment preferences, you can do that today. So they're big numbers, something that we're really very proud of. But our main focus has always been in getting every single one of those people a job. We've definitely been on a journey. I alluded to that at the beginning of this welcome speech. And many of you have been on that with us. So from launching as a search engine here in Australia in 2011 to where we are today, an automated matching and hiring platform. And through our commitment to R&D and our investment in technology, we've brought many products to you to try and help you attract and source and screen talent over that time and to really find you the best people for your open roles. And we've done all of that because we really want to make hiring simpler, faster and more human. Today on Indeed, someone finds a job every 3 seconds. By the time you're out of here and going back to your lovely companies, we would have helped another 1,200 people. So it's something that we're incredibly passionate about, and we've got a couple of pretty significant goals that we're working towards by the end of this decade. One of those is that we want to reduce the time it takes for somebody to get a job on our platform by 50% by the end of this decade. And we obviously want to do that because we want to improve efficiencies. We want to, minimize lengthy periods of time in unemployment, and we really want to help boost productivity as well. We're also committed to helping 30 million job seekers who face barriers to find work by 2030. We've helped about 7 million globally since 2021. So we, again, are very passionate about this. And I think, skills-based hiring, the topic that we're getting into today, is really going to be a critical part of our efforts here because it breaks down so many of the bias and barriers that job seekers face through the hiring process. So for the very first time, the workforce now spans 6 generations. So today on Indeed, about 3/4 of job seekers are under the age of 45 and just over half are aged between 18 and 34. And as industries transforms and AI advances, the ability to upskill and reskill becomes crucial for employers and job seekers alike. You're going to hear some of this stuff today from Rachael, but each generation have varying levels of confidence when it comes to their ability to grow within their careers. And it really is up to us as industry leaders to really figure out, how we carve out that path for them and really enable and empower that growth. So that's the last 10 years. What about the next 10 years? Are you ready? Let's jump into the topic for today. So skills has really emerged as the new currency of organisational capability, and it requires a fundamental shift in how we're thinking about job roles, workforce development and talent recruitment as well. Our latest research in partnership with YouGov is called Skillfully Aligned, Closing the Gap for Future-Proofed Workforce, which provides a comprehensive analysis of the current skills landscape. It also goes beyond that, and it provides a blueprint for the most crucial skills needed for future business success. It also explores some of the benefits and the challenges that we're facing with skills-based hiring and how we might consider that through the lens of internal mobility. I learned a ton within this report, and there's some really great things in terms of link outs and additional learning material. So please do, if you haven't already, take the QR code. You're going to be hearing about some of the top level insights from Rachael, one of our panelists today. So we're excited to share that with you. So now let's get into it. Very excited to introduce our panelists today. Am I doing all right for time? These bios are quite large, guys. Quite large. Let me have a glass of water before I get into it. What's that?
Cliff Notes version.
Okay.
Sure.
We wrote them ourselves.
Cliff Notes version. The amount of roles that you've had, Mark, I think it's going to take me about 5 minutes. Lots of skills I should imagine you've learned over this time. New South Wales Shadow Minister for Jobs, Innovation, Science and Technology, Mark Coure. Mark has served as the member for Oatley since 2011. He lives in Penshurst with his wife Adler, a teacher, and their sons James and Sam. Mark studied at Macquarie University and went on to run a successful business and served on Kogarah City Council for 8 years. He's held various parliamentary roles, including Deputy Whip, Chair of Environment and Planning, Parliamentary Secretary for Transport and Infrastructure, Assistant Speaker, promoted to Minister for Multiculturalism and Seniors in 2021. He is now the Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, Jobs, Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology in South Western Sydney. Welcome to you, Mark. Indeed is also proud to partner with you, with me at this event. We're going to welcome Chief Customer Officer Sia Kouparitsas. Did it, didn't I? To the panel. With you, with me, I know a lot of you have been invited by this company, so you may already know them. If you don't know them, they're a global tech company with a fantastic workforce skills SaaS platform. I've seen it, I had a demo a few weeks ago, that enables organizations to find, manage and grow their employees' skills in line with their corporate goals. Sia is an award-winning executive manager who has spent 15 years leading teams in the IT sector across APAC, UK, USA and Canada. Now, as Chief Customer Officer, Sia dedicates her efforts to cultivating highly skilled workforces whilst also creating opportunities for people from underserved communities. Great mission, love the company. And our final panelist today is our very own Rachael Townsley, Director Country Marketing, who oversees our marketing strategy in Australia, has recently taken on a larger portfolio with India and Singapore, so she knows all about those countries if you're interested, who has also been a key part of the development of this skills research project. She's a dynamic leader, highly experienced with recognisable brands in entertainment, tech, media and advertising sectors. She's super open and fosters a wonderful environment of diversity and inclusion. She's an active mentor. She gives a lot of time back to the industry and invests time in developing emerging talent, as well as being an advocate for women in underrepresented groups. What a panel, hey? What a lot of knowledge on the panel. So we're going to have some time for questions at the end of it, but for now I am going to hand over to Sia, who's going to get the discussion started. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Laura. How embarrassing. So, as Laura mentioned, it's National Skills Week, and so great to be able to bring so many leaders in the HR space together in a room to celebrate that and also talk about the topic that's on everyone's agenda, skills. I know I've spoken to a number of you this morning, now afternoon, and it's a priority for everyone, from managers who are needing their teams to perform and achieve the priorities they're setting, but right through to that board level, where for the first time strategic workforce planning is really on the agenda, because the impact of digital transformation and AI can no longer be ignored. So we have been talking about skills for a number of years now, but I do think it has taken on a special significance in the past 12 months, particularly with this impact of generative AI and how that is changing roles at every level. I think even if you rewind 30 years ago, a role was something for life. People would pick a career, they would tend to leverage that same skill set, whereas today we now have a lifespan that's around 5 years for skills, according to IBM. So every organisation cares about making sure they have the skills that they need, but not every organisation knows how to do that just at the moment. And that's what we're going to be exploring today in terms of whether it's reskilling, upskilling, hiring skills in. What are some of those solutions that others in the industry are doing to solve this problem? So as Laura mentioned, I care deeply about this problem because our company, WithYouWithMe, it's a global HR tech organisation that works with organisations around the world to build workforces that are skilled, fit for purpose and inclusive. We do that with a tech platform that basically helps them manage that end-to-end workforce challenge. So typically we'd start off with building a skills framework for an organisation so that they can get a picture of what are the skills they actually need to achieve their organisational objectives. We then move into skills mapping people to be able to provide that view of what capabilities they currently have in place. And from that, you get an extraordinary view as to where the gaps are and whether that requires upskilling or reskilling, or whether it is hiring in. So I'm looking forward to sharing what we're doing with customers here in Australia, but also around the world. We work in the UK, North America being USA and Canada. But I'm even more excited to be getting the opinion of both Mark and Rachael on this topic today. So we might start with you, Mark. I know you're deeply connected into both industry and government on this issue, and also very, very active in the skills agenda and what that looks like. And I'm very curious, as we are on the precipice of Skills Week, what is your perception in terms of how we're going with dealing with the skills problem? Are people moving in the right direction?
Well, I'll answer that wearing a couple of different hats. And firstly, thank you so much for the introduction. It is wonderful to be here. Anytime that they use my middle name is usually when I'm in trouble. But look, I think both as a shadow minister, a former minister, a shadow minister, but also married to a school teacher, I can see wearing different hats. And, you know, I think a number of organisations, and I've seen the stats, you know, it's the high 60s, I think it's a lot more than that. A lot of organisations, there is a skills gap in Australia or across the world. We are, without wanting to sound a bit Star Trekky, we are standing on an edge of a new frontier with the digital transformation and AI. And it is interesting, you know, I think, you know, with all the reports and the books that are on my desk that I've read over recent years, it's affecting every industry in a good way, but government needs to be part of that. And certainly, you know, there is a national approach too. I think the federal minister, Ed Husic, has only a couple of months ago announced with state and territory leaders sort of an AI roundtable and a bit of direction in that space. But there is a skills gap there. And, you know, certainly as my wife being a school teacher, I've seen firsthand just, you know, how she's been able to or needing to adapt to the new technology of AI just in recent years. It is here. It is a game changer, and we've got to adapt with it. And we've got to adapt pretty fast. We've got to use it as an advantage, not as a negative. You know, kids as young as 10 are taking full advantage of that digital transformation already. And I have two kids, one is 10, one is 5, hurricane and tsunami as I call them. And I see already, you know, what they are able to do with that transformation, that AI. And, you know, he's able to type up with the assistance of AI, not just short paragraphs, but long essays on anything from, the recent one was John F. Kennedy. That's being used in the curriculum, and, you know, teachers, of course, need to, at a much higher level, need to obviously figure out pretty early if it's your work or not. That's the first thing, and I see that almost daily. And my wife is doing trial HSC, papers, marking, but we've got to ensure that, you know, industry is equipped with all of this fast-pacing change, and it has to happen, and it has to happen yesterday, not weeks or months or whatever. And it's every single industry. You see it in medical, you see it in defence, you see it in education. Across every industry is going to be affected by this. And governments are, unfortunately, a little slow to come to the party on this. But I think in recent months, and maybe the last 12 months, you know, governments both here and overseas are seeing, you know, the power behind AI. And we're seeing it in the recent US election without being too political. You know, you don't know what's truth or fiction these days sometimes, particularly on social media. And it's that AI intelligence behind it, and you've got to adapt. And, you know, people in our group, sort of my group, my age bracket, you know, I think many of them are well aware that the world is changing, but are probably not aware of how fast it's changing. And if I can just digress a little bit, when I was Minister for Seniors, we had a program called Computer Seniors. I think it was called Seniors IT or something along those lines. And it was a program that we ran right throughout New South Wales to give seniors equipped with IT and online banking and all of that, which is so important, but of course teaching them about scams. But now I think governments really need to be proactive in ensuring that generally, it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are, that, you know, people are being trained and supported in regards to that transformation into, you know, AI and digital transformation. Because looking at your figures before, there are, you know, a lot of people looking in different age groups for jobs and employment. It's about upskilling, the importance of upskilling, but also for those that are in jobs, like, you know, my wife is a school teacher, ensuring that they are being trained as well. So for those in jobs and looking for jobs, training and further education is really important.
That's fascinating. There's something I want to zero in on what you said. You were talking about skills gaps and needing to be proactive. And I think it aligns with the way we've been thinking about it recently, which is it a skills gap or is it a skills lag? And what I mean by that is the skills gap is kind of something that's very static in time. It's saying we have this gap and we need to fill it. And if we fill it, we'll be good. And the way that technology is constantly evolving means that that's just not the case. There is a constant lag. You need to be thinking ahead as to how are these skills constantly going to be iterating with technology coming so that you're constantly staying ahead of that lag. And one of the best examples that I've seen of this happening is with one of our customers, a long-term customer here in Australia, which is the Australian Army. So one of the biggest organisations in Australia. And we partnered with them to do some research into the impact that AI and AI augmentation would have on their workforce in the next 5, 10 and 15 years because they wanted to get ahead of the problem, which is great. You spoke about defence. The impact of AI is quite startling. I think they found in 5 years, there would be 50% of roles impacted by either augmentation or AI. So AI being that it will replace the capabilities of some roles, but the augmentation was 30% of the workforce would need to learn new skills to be able to handle the technologies that were coming. And having that level of foresight meant that Army could start to prepare in terms of what are they going to be doing to make sure that their people are moving in the right direction to get the skills they need ahead of time. In the instance that you have roles that might be automated, where is the opportunity to find potential in those individuals and upskill them into the new and emerging areas? And I think that's just a really great example of how people are starting to think about it, particularly at the scale of Army, which is quite significant. Rachael, I do want to get your perspective on this because I know Laura mentioned some of the great research that you guys have done into this, and skills and getting ahead of the skills and skills hiring is on everyone's agenda. Talk to me a bit about that research.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you all for coming and choosing to spend some time with us today. Me and my team are super passionate about research. It is at the backbone of all of our marketing programs. And what we've done with this research is we have both surveyed the Australian workforce, but we've also surveyed employers, specifically those that have HR and recruitment roles, because we think it's really beneficial to be able to see both sides, see where the synergies are and be able to call those out. And sometimes there's conflicts. However, with this, it was more of a synergy. So that was quite a nice story. But I think some of the key insights that came out for us, and you can download the report in more depth. The first is, we've touched on it today, the skills gap is widening. 69% of employers say that they acknowledge there's a gap in their organisation right now. 69% also say they expect that will widen over the next 5 years, with a third of those also saying they expect it to get a lot harder. So for us, it gets us thinking, is traditional hiring the way forward, or do we need to look at alternates like investing more in upskilling and skills-based hiring? The second piece that I wanted to call out in the report that we found interesting, which you've also touched on, is around the shelf life of skills. And you mentioned 5, we have 7. So, but it's a lot less than it was. Because, gone are those days where you could just walk into a job, you'd learn a few bits on the job, maybe move up to the side and then leave after 3 decades. Employees today are required to upskill 5 times over, which for some, that might be really exciting. We know everyone loves change, but for others, that's really daunting. And, us as employers have a really critical role to play in that. And then the third piece, which I'll touch on a bit later on, is the need for guidance and support. And it's also around those multi-generational strategies, which are going to be really, really important, especially to your point with the kids that are growing up with technology and then those that are, having to go through it, whether it's in education or otherwise. But the good news for Australians, they're a really confident bunch, the Australian workforce. So when we asked how confident they were in their abilities to upskill and prepare for where their work and their role will be in the next 5 years, 91% said, absolutely, I'm super confident. And they were really optimistic, more so than some of the more negative perceptions. They were the second most confident in the world after India. So that's good. However, over half, they just don't know where to start when it comes to skills. And if we think of generations coming through, that was sat at 65% with Gen Z. So there really is a need for organizations to provide some of that support and guidance. Now that could be because, they've come in, they don't have a clear role or career path. It could also be because you work for a wonderful company that has all these tools and resources, but then maybe it's that kind of paralysis of choice again. So there really is this need for tailored skill development programs across the workforce, specifically when it comes to the generations that are within it as well.
And I think you hit the nail on the head that something that's really daunting for both the individual and the organisation is where to start and how do you motivate people on that journey to grow the skills that they need. And I know we've been sort of looking at it through the lens of what we call the 3 C's, because I do enjoy a bit of alliteration to remember things. And it's that first step being clarity. So what are those skills that the organisation actually needs? Because to the point Laura made in the introduction, if you can align the objectives of your organisation with the objectives of the actual individual, then you're going to be motivating them to upskill and move in the direction that a company needs to. So the first step is defining what skills do you actually need. The second C for us is clarity in terms of, well, what skills do I actually have? And you can get that clarity from, doing a skills mapping exercise where you actually see what skills are in place. But what we have found to be particularly motivating is doing a broader suite of assessment that also touches on cognitive ability, learning preference, psychometrics, to start to identify perhaps where the propensity to learn new skills naturally might be for an individual. We call it the low-hanging fruit. So if someone's got a natural inclination to learn a certain type of skill, let's give them an early win and let's prioritise that in their learning and development plan. And then the final C is the closure piece. So obviously you've got your capability, your clarity, and now how do we close that gap? And the motivation piece is critically important to that, because I think we all invest in learning and development, and a lot of the time it doesn't necessarily work. People either choose what they want to learn or what they're interested in learning, or completion rates may not be there. So it's thinking about what tools can we be using to actually motivate people in that direction that the company needs, which is really interesting. Now, Mark, I want to throw back to you. You mentioned Ed Cusick before, and I always hark back to when he and the Tech Council of Australia announced that Australia needed 1.2 million new tech workers by 2030, which is a lot. And it's also not taking into consideration just the new tech skills that the general worker also needs. So obviously, tech skills are a huge capability that we need to be investing in. And I would really love to hear your perspective on how government can help support this to happen.
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And, since I took over this role as the Shadow Minister, ever since the change of government last year, I've always wanted to go back to basics, and it starts with high school. I mean, computers, science, maths in many schools are still not compulsory. To me, I think that's wrong. Some of those subjects do need to be looked at as being compulsory subjects. At the moment, I think it's only English from memory. And I think that's where it starts. I think, over the years, we've seen governments on both sides offer, free TAFE courses.
Free TAFE.
Free TAFE. But again, I think that goes a long way, but I still don't think it sort of reaches the mark where we need to be. I think, to your point before, I think, corporations, industry need to put a lot more money and resources into education. Education needs to be, reskilling needs to be front and centre of every single corporation there is. And I've worked in and out of corporations before I was in Parliament. And I mean, it was, over 10 years ago, but still, I think they were sort of doing it, but not doing it professionally. And I think what we've seen is, there is these gaps. These gaps are not going to go away. There is that lag that you mentioned before. But as a government, we need to offer those, those incentives for young people, or any age for that matter, to go back to university, to go to TAFE, to pick up, a skill or skills, and continue learning. We need to make learning exciting. And, it does start at that high school level, things like STEM, making sure that, again, that's front and centre. And I must say, as member of parliament and as a parent, there was the hype of STEM 10 years ago, but for whatever reason now it's sort of dropped off. School curriculums, they're sort of doing it, but it's not front and centre. But it starts at that level, and I think COVID has really been, and the lockdown was a real wake-up call for many people, for many industries, for corporations such as this, that we need to obviously ensure that our workforce is skilled. When you're applying for a job, either here or overseas, you're applying against not just the local cohort of people looking for employment. You're competing against people from even overseas who are willing to move to Sydney. My brother was one of them. He moved to Dubai, and he's an accountant. But he was able to, on his resume, demonstrate that he had the skills that were required, that were able to, for him, he knew quite a few different languages, being trained as an accountant, but he was able to edge ahead. And I think it's that edging ahead that's really required for people of all different ages. And so over the years, governments have, had a number of free TAFE courses for different ages. I talked about the Tech Savvy Seniors program that I sort of assisted and boosted when I was Minister for Seniors. But there's one group that's really missing in all of this, and I really do worry about this group, and it's those of non-English speaking backgrounds that are here in Sydney or here in Australia that may fall behind. And that's where governments need to ensure that, that training that, say, for example, TAFE is offering is being offered in as many different languages as possible to ensure that no one's left behind.
It's a great point you make as well, because I think when you do look at the skills agenda, it is very supportive of people from underrepresented backgrounds like that as well. If you have to have been to a certain school or university to qualify for a position previously, it locks out large portions of society. Whereas if you can demonstrate that you have a skill in a skills-based economy, you're playing in a more level playing field. So hopefully, by default, moving to that skills-based workforce is opening up more opportunities for people, English as a second language or any kind of underrepresented group in our workforce. Rachel, I want to go back to the employer side of the piece and the research, because I know we started touching on some of these different types of people, different generations, and I'm really eager to understand from your perspective, not only that generational view, but also upskilling versus reskilling versus skills-based hiring, because we've spoken about a few different ways organisations are tackling it, and I want to hear what the research says.
Yeah, I think, I'll start by just talking about, and to one of your points earlier, one of your C's around, I think it was clarity, like what are those skills that are needed? And I think there's a big gap there, specifically from some of the conversations we've been having as part of this skills research. So we asked employers, what skills do you think are required for success in the next 5 years? And we also asked employees, which skills do you see are the most important for you across the next 5 years? Good news, synergies. So we are aligned. There may have been different number one versus number three. But there was some general synergies. And the thoughts there, whilst we're talking a lot, around AI and technology, and that is important, it was in the top 5. The key skills that we see in our research for success in the future at an individual level and a business level are really those soft skills. It's communication, it's adaptability, it's collaboration and problem solving, which actually, things have changed a lot in the last few years. AI for us used to be very much, in the machines or for data scientists. And now with the likes of ChatGPT, it really is in the palms of our hands, even to your point, for young people now as well. So that is going to be required, but I think having those soft skills, and the ability to adapt, whatever comes in the next 5 years, they're going to be really important. So that was something that came out for us. Whether you're going about skills-based hiring, upskilling, reskilling. So yes, that human soft skills plus that technological acumen is going to be really important. But when it comes to the generations, there is some differences, and there's things that we have to take into account when we're, hiring different generations, as well as investing in learning and development programs within our organizations, because there's so much diversity that comes with having, so many different people within the workforce, whether it's creativity and innovation to productivity. But there are differences. So I'll just call out a few from the research. The first is Gen Z. So Gen Z, we have them labeled in the report as the flight risk. And that's not because, they're always on the lookout for new opportunities. It's because they value continuous learning and development, and they want really clear growth pathing. So if organizations don't offer that, they will go and look elsewhere for it. So in terms of hiring, being transparent in that is going to be really important, and then also helping to guide them once they're in the business as well. From a millennial point of view, millennials are proactive about upskilling. They place specific focus on some of those soft skills, but also digital and tech literacy, which is really important. Again, this group, they do favour employer-led programs as well. So that guidance piece is still coming through with that audience. But in providing that, it really can foster loyalty and productivity. So it is really beneficial for both individuals and the organisation. As we go to Gen X, they value competence and autonomy. So they really want self-directed learning opportunities. And they need to be able to see how these new skills relate to their roles, as well as their future within the company, and potentially how they progress through their careers. And then finally, with the boomers generation, they prioritize stability and can be a little bit resistant to change and upskilling. But they do understand the importance of technical skills. I did hear a really good example at a roundtable we hosted on this topic a few weeks ago. And it just brought about the importance to understand the why. And this was a company that had a factory, and there was a worker within the factory, and they were changing their processes, they were automating, and they were doing all of, it was all using iPads. So they were facing a bit of resistance. And the woman gave an example of just really understanding, like, why are they resistant to this change and how can we address that? And it was, too new, wasn't familiar with the technology. They then found out that this guy loved boats. So they got the iPad, they showed him what he could do with it to, fuel his love of boats, and he was converted. So I think, being able to understand that why and be able to tailor training programs to that generation is really going to challenge some of that resistance, and also probably boost engagement there as well.
I love that change management 101, make it about the boats.
Yes.
And I loved also, so hearing you talk about the motivations, like how do we motivate people through the different generations to get on board with these kinds of programs? And there is a change management piece. You mentioned Gen Z being a flight risk, and if they don't feel like they're being invested in, they're going to leave. And it reminds me of this piece of work we're doing at the moment with Endeavour Group here in Australia, which is a big retail group, owns BWS, Dan Murphy's, all of that side of the piece. And the reason they came to us to do skills frameworks and skills mapping, I think in part was certainly to understand the capabilities that they would need moving forward, but a big part of it was to support their dream big promise for their people. So it was all about helping their people feel engaged and identify long-term career pathways within the organisation, and to respond to feedback that they'd got through pulse surveys that they didn't feel that their professional development was linking to potential career opportunities within the organisation, and tapping into those, not only the skills that they have versus the skills they need, but tapping into those motivational factors in terms of the generational, the learning preference, the potential to learn skills, the low-hanging fruit that I spoke about, is really been identified as key to not only sort of fill that capability gap, but to make it meaningful in that employee experience. And you also mentioned the change management piece, because I just know that's been something that's been really interesting for us going on this journey with Endeavour, because they're a huge organisation, 30,000 people. There was at one point where we were talking about rolling this out across the entire organisation, but the path that we've gone down is to break it down into divisions and tranches because there are nuances in every team. People need to come along for the ride. We've started in marketing because the marketing division is obviously one that is impacted by evolving technologies and they need their people to learn those skills. But the plan is to kind of systematically roll it out across every division. And the level of buy-in, it's been a really interesting process because it's being driven from strategic workforce and learning and development, but the level of buy-in that every department needs to have on the journey has been quite extraordinary in the sense that we brief them, we take them through the why, they understand how it's going to impact their unique organisational objectives, both in the short term, but also that longer term plan as well. And it's been a real partnership, which has been really interesting just to watch that unfold. I do want to go back to you, Mark, and we've touched obviously on digital transformation, automation and AI. And I also touched at the start on the fact that you have a very unique perspective in the sense that you meet all the time with businesses, industry. You have quite the vantage point for people who are doing it well or organisations that aren't. Talk to me about some of the case studies, I guess, that you've seen that demonstrate the benefits of cross-industry partnerships and things like that.
Yeah, I think I can't go past Amazon. So I've been to Amazon a couple of times in Western Sydney. They've got two large warehouses, depositories, I think they're called, depositories. One at Moorebank and I think the one at Leppington, I think it's near Leppington. These are fully automatic processes with, I think, the best AI technology, robotic technology I have seen in any workplace. They will print the books. Robot will pick it up, take it to a printer in-house, and you get your book or your favourite magazine the day after. And the way in which it's fully robotic is extraordinary. And sure, it's been happening, it's been around for a long time, but this is taking away, this is obviously increasing the efficiency of Amazon, the ability to return or to package and send off as quickly as possible, closing a lot of those gaps. And I've seen it from that angle. And obviously there are quite a number of people still working there and then doing a great job as well. They've all been upskilled with obviously the digital literacy and the upskilling, the reskilling that's needed as well, same as every other industry. But I think I can't go past Amazon just to see it there at that level there, which, obviously has gone a long way when they first started.
Yes, my mind continues to be blown when I purchase a book and it arrives the next day. To understand
That's
the
right.
technology behind that is...
That's exactly right. And, they've got this ability to print whatever book you need pretty much there and then on the spot, have it then packaged and delivered and sent out to people the very next day, sometimes quite late, but the very next day. But it's that technology that we've got to adapt to, and industry has got to adapt to as well, along with the upskilling and the reskilling that's needed. There is that lag, as you mentioned before, and we've got to get to that as quickly as possible, and that's where governments play, but can't do it alone, play an important role. That's where industry needs to also, obviously, in partnership with governments, play a very active role. And over the years, we've seen industry and education and governments come together. And I think we're sort of heading in the right direction, but there is a lot more to happen.
Yeah. And on that note, Rachael, the future of work, what are the top priorities, top 3 considerations employers need to be doing?
Well, look, we talk about the future of work a lot, but I'll keep it to skills. But I think the first is, where you can lean into skills-based hiring and certainly keep your investment in upskilling and redeveloping your talent, because that is going to help to bridge that skills gap. And using and leveraging that skills-first mindset is really going to help to uncover hidden talent within your organisation and set you up for that success in the future. The second would be, thinking about those future skills and really focusing on not just the soft skills, but also pairing that with technical capabilities, because they're really important. And the future workforce really does demand that balanced skill set. And I think, from the conversation today, what has come out is we really do need to be adaptable because, things are evolving all the time. So we might not necessarily know what that next technology is, but if, we have those soft skills, we can certainly navigate that a lot better. And finally, it's really around tailoring, whether it's skills-based hiring, upskilling, reskilling, your learning and development programs, really tailoring those for the different generations. Because we have the most generations in the workforce than we've ever had before. And Generation Alpha is going to be coming through shortly as well. So that's going to continue to grow. People are working longer as well, but there's certainly unique expectations and preferences, and a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. So really listening and addressing those will be key as well.
Absolutely. And the adaptability point, I think, is a really interesting one, because we often get asked why are we moving to a skills-based system and why does skills matter? And I think the adaptability is kind of at the core as well. We do work with a lot of defence primes in Australia, and one of the reasons they are increasingly shifting to skills is because they typically work on a project basis. They get large projects in and they need to be mobilising and deploying people to them. And traditionally it might have been bringing people in on a contract basis to service some of those projects. But what they're now looking at is if they can see person on this project has XYZ skills and they can move over to that in the next 6 months, they don't need to be cycling through people in that same way. They could be planning and strategically moving across different projects and priorities, which is great to see. Mark, last word from you, because I'm very conscious that we're just about to run out of time. And I just want to round out on that future workforce trend piece. So if we are looking ahead to the next 5-10 years, what do you think is going to be the most significant trend for the workforce? And is there a way that you would suggest organisations start to prepare for this change, whether it be through recruitment, skilling?
Yeah. Look, another great question. And I think, that next big thing that you talked about before, I mean, AI is here, it's here to stay. And, obviously, all industries and levels of government need to be prepared for the next big thing beyond that. But I think upskilling and reskilling is really important. It has to be front and centre for every organisation. Digital literacy is so important. I go back to my original comment with, it starts at that school age level, but continues, it just doesn't stop. And it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're looking for employment or in employment, that reskilling and that digital literacy and keeping up with every single skill you could possibly know, and be hungry for it. I think that's the other thing, as you mentioned before, you've really got to be hungry for further education. And I think governments, want to see close to low or lower unemployment. And the last thing you need is a workforce in Australia that isn't skilled. We are competing against other countries for employment opportunities, enticing industry to come here and to set up shop here in Sydney or in Australia. But it's the upskilling, it's the reskilling, it's the digital literacy that people of all different ages need to continue with.
Couldn't agree with you more. Okay, we might have some time for questions. Does anyone have any questions for anyone on the panel?
I'll kick us off.
Yeah.
I'm Helena, I'm from an organisation called Go Figure, and I contributed to the report actually, which was exciting. Skills-based hiring and skills-based talent management, it's the word of the day, right, or the word of the year. And it sounds really easy and really compelling in theory, but it's maybe a bit harder for most of us to imagine how we take that back to work tomorrow. Do you have any insights from the report or any tips on just something really practical that we could all do, that we could maybe start next week to start us on this journey?
Yeah, just
Leave that open to anyone.
I think you probably might be
I'm
the best
happy to
one
jump
on
in.
that one,
And
yeah.
I was having this exact conversation with someone this morning, actually. I think technology, obviously I have a technology platform with our company, but technology is a great place to start, because I know that for many people, and actually I was speaking to a lovely lady here, when you're doing workforce planning and you're trying to work out the skills that you need, it's traditionally been very manual, in an Excel spreadsheet typically. And it's not really a dynamic view. You set it and you forget it, not really, but it makes it quite tricky. And the great thing with technology is there are faster, smarter, more efficient ways that you can do it, where essentially, like, one of our approaches is we can take your position descriptions as an example and immediately translate them into a skills-based language that forms the architecture for your organisation. That obviously you then get in there and scrutinise, and we dig into the detail, and is this what you have now or what you want in the future? But I would definitely say explore technology as a way to expedite the process. And even this shift to skills-based language, I think, is another really easy starting point, in that for many years people have been talking about tasks in a position description, and the tasks are important, but what are the skills that underpin that? And there's many great frameworks that you can look at in terms of starting. We use Sophia, which is the skills framework for the information age. It's largely in the digital space, but it does actually provide coverage across most roles within a corporate environment. And it's a great starting point for any organisation that's looking to get a feel for what a skills framework might be, because you can then sort of build out from there in terms of the unique skills and capabilities you might require for certain distinct, I say marketing department as an example because I've referenced it before, but believe it or not, the majority of marketing capabilities are reflected in the Sophia framework. But that's just a couple of things I would say. I would say that I think it sounds more daunting than it is, and there's always a way just to get started. Like, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I always get that wrong, but I love that saying too, because I think, we all plan and try and do the best possible thing, but if we can just edge in the right direction, we're starting to build that momentum and get moving.
Thank you.
Small steps.
Yes.
I've got a quick question, more probably for the room. I think we've got some large organisations in the room, and I was just wondering if anybody's gone through this process themselves that might have some advice and tips for people that might be on the start of their journey.
That's a great question. Anyone brave?
I mean, I'm happy to share. So we're with the Stack Group, and part of what we're doing it is that understanding what skills you have today, and then mapping out what exactly are the clearly defined skills that you need in the future. Because I guess what you want to bring through the door in terms of talent or mobility, upskilling and reskilling is hiring for the future. And so we're doing a lot of work. We're embarking on a bit of a skills taxonomy process at the moment, trying to get ourselves to a talent marketplace, moving away from this mindset of putting people in a job to more of a putting people in their skills, the gig economy type of concept as well. So I think it's actually just mapping it out. And part of our problem is we do it just in time. So we have a need for hiring, and then we have a supply of people that are coming out of roles because we're impacting offshoring, etc. And I think the thing for us is, how do we match the current supply with the future demand?
Yes.
And so we're trying to crack that at the moment. It is very manual, but we're trying to explore that. Yeah, it is, because you have people walk out the door, and it's unfortunate because then you have people walk through the door and you're letting, organisational context and a capability just leave you.
Domain knowledge.
Exactly.
And it's funny, we've got one of our arms is in the UK, and we did some work with the UK bank just on that, in the sense that they were looking to close down a call centre that had all of these employees that they were going to be losing, and at the same time they were trying to scale up their data analytics team. So we did an exercise where we didn't map for the skills that they needed, because those skills weren't quite there yet, but it was mapping the potential to learn skills. And we were able to identify the individuals in the call centre who would have a natural propensity to upskill and move into data analytics. And it kind of speaks back to that army example I gave as well. If you can just sort of get ahead of the problem and start to plan how you can invest and mobilise your people, it comes together in a really nice way. And I love you mentioned talent marketplace. I've heard a couple of people here talk about this shift to a talent marketplace, and I think it's a great practical example of when you do shift to skills, if you've got the skills and the person has the skills and the job has the skills, that's when you can really intuitively start matching, and technology is a great way to do that. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm Darren Campbell. I work for DCJ, Department of Communities and Justice. I'm hearing...
I was one of your ministers.
I wasn't there.
I had said yes.
When I hear all this stuff talking about, we've got Gen Z coming through at the moment, what are they, 12 to 24 years of age. Most of those guys at the top end there went through and did their HSC and were in COVID over that period of time. And I'm talking to a lot of the universities at the moment to try and get an understanding of how many of them are actually finishing their degrees. Because I think when we hear about Westpac saying about the pipelines coming through, when we look at the amount of teachers out there, we look at the amount of nurses out there and things like that. And when I look at my kids were in that group, and thankfully they've still going through and finishing their degrees, but the amount of people I'm hearing that dropped out, that, they stayed at home for 3 years in a row. They started university, and after 6 months, the amount of them just went, forget this. And I am deeply concerned that we are having, that pipeline's drying up. 8.2% youth unemployment. So.
Well, that's only in Sydney. In southeast Sydney, it's close to 20%.
Yep.
Youth unemployment.
So.
16, I think it is.
Yeah, so that nationally it's 8.2, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is double the unemployment rate. So my question, and I don't expect you guys to answer it, but every time I speak to a university, nobody can actually tell me what the changes are.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get a very big bump in the road over the next 5 years when these kids all start to go through and then finally decide what they want to do, or whatever the case may be. But there's not as many nurses coming through, and we already have a huge problem with nurses. We already have a huge problem with teachers. We already have a huge problem with caseworkers and social workers and things like that. And then there's not as many people going into it. So I suppose, how do we get those and reskill? How do we train these people and bring them into this? There's a big bump coming along the road that is concerning, because the boomers are all going to go.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And it's a great research topic for Indeed, I think, because it's one of those forgotten impacts, I think, of the pandemic. And we can talk about skills, and there are certainly practical skills that you can learn for certain types of roles, but there's always going to be the need for
a degree.
Exactly, a degree, but also for different trades. And I think probably what happened a lot during the pandemic is people realised they could just go out and get a job post-pandemic without the degree. And the repercussion of that is not necessarily being felt just yet.
No, I think it is.
The challenge we also have with that sort of thing, though, is that degrees are really expensive.
Yeah.
And the cost of living is really expensive.
And I can't get my kids to leave home ever.
But, the other thing is that they don't get paid for going into placements for months at a time. Like, how do you pay your rent or, leave home or do any of the exciting things that you wanted to do when you're in your 20s? If you're not getting paid to do those sorts of things. And we're talking about reskilling and upskilling, and that's what everyone's going to need in the future. But some of these degrees are lengthy and time consuming. And even personally, if I wanted to do a degree, I'm not going to earn another 70 grand when I leave that degree. So is it worth it? And I think that you hit those sorts of stalemates as well with upskilling.
Yeah, I mean, look, governments across Australia are now supporting, obviously, additional training to get into nursing or policing, for example. They'll pay the 3 or 4 year diploma degree in those industries because there is, to your point, huge shortages in, a number of different industries. But that's, again, only touching sort of the sides, because there is, a lot more industries where government and industry, for that matter, can play a huge part in ensuring that we get more young people taking up trades, finishing those trades, degrees, for example. And that's the other thing. I mean, trades, I've got a family who are, except for me, cabinet makers, and my younger brother who's an accountant. But, for the rest of them, there are not enough young people going into trades these days because young people don't see a trade as sexy. They don't want to be earning very little or low amounts of income and get their hands or hair dirty.
I was going to say, I thought they were paying a fortune,
No, I'm talking about apprenticeships. Apprenticeships,
Definitely.
Apprenticeships, in the early years. And then, of course, it's the high incomes, as you mentioned before. I'm renovating my house, I don't really tell you. And then when they see politician, they get another zero at the end. So that's why I get people from outside my community. So look, that's a really good point, and I think governments are only really touching the sides in terms of this. By offering those, nursing and policing degrees virtually free, next to nothing. But again, we could go a long way further. And we haven't. You're absolutely right. I don't think we've sort of hit that peak yet. People.
And are we doing enough talking to those kids when they're in year 10, when they've got to make these decisions?
Yeah.
right? Because I remember when my kids were back there, they don't do all that much. Like I remember we used to go to school counsellor and there's only 3 jobs they'd ever talk to you about. You can get a job in a bank, you can be a policeman, or you can be a nurse. They were the only 3. Yeah. But we don't speak to them enough, so they start their minds thinking about what am I going to do? And if you're in certain areas, you think the degree, your dad will tell you, mate, you can't get a degree, that costs you a lot of money. When those ones aren't going to pay you.
Rachael, was to say something.
Oh, the only thing that I was going to say, and we've seen this in data, not in this research, but in others, is it's not just bringing people through, it's them retaining them because of the attrition. And I think we hear it from people we work with, we hear it at the, events that we're part of as well, is some of the key things now. Pay is obviously still up there, but flexibility is on the rise, and we hear it from our partners in employment where they have teachers that want to contract these days. And my husband was in the police. He left because the hours were crazy, and they didn't work with family life. So I think there is this piece that we need to understand it, but I think there's also better understanding the workforce and the demands today, and how can these organisations help to address some of that as well, to make it a place that, they might want to stay for, 30, 40, 50 years.
Family friendly.
Family friendly.
Could I just to your point, you actually made a very good point there. Now, I'm a little younger.
I've had a very hard life.
When I was at school, the careers advisor, unfortunately, was that teacher who was looking at retirement. And I only really focused on 2 or 3 jobs, to your point. It wasn't nursing, but it was defence, firefighting, and police.
Yeah.
Maybe a trade. And I've seen a lot of that in a lot of schools. My wife has seen a lot of that in a lot of schools, where that careers advisor has been, I'm sure, a lovely person, don't get me wrong, but on the way out, looking at retirement herself. Again, schools need to be front and centre of upskilling and reskilling and looking to the future in terms of the placement of young people into those future careers. And we all know that, where everyone will have 7, 8, 9, 10 different careers in 10 different industries perhaps in their lifetime. But again, it's that front and centre. Schools need to come to the party and really focus on that and not be a second thought. It's not the case now, but it was when I was at school, which was 20 years ago.
Great point to end on. So thank you so much, Rachael and Mark. I think we're just out of time, but maybe we could have a chat afterwards. Thank you. But thank you, everyone. I might pass back to you just to
Thank you to
close
PJ.
up. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much, Sia, Mark, Rachael. Yeah, we did run over a little bit, but it was such a rich discussion. We just thought we'll let you carry on. If you do want to hang out and you've got more questions, Sia, are you able to stick around for a little bit? And Mark, I'm sure will be around for another 10 minutes or so. I've just taken a couple of nuggets. I think we learned a ton then, but obviously right from the start, AI, fast evolving industries obviously need to be well equipped to handle this change. Employers say 69% of the gaps that they're facing today potentially are going to increase. We're going to have to reskill, 5 times in our lifetime? I think it's going to be more than that with the way things are going. 91% confident, but half don't know where to start. We talked about capability, clarity, and closure. I loved those 3 C's, a great framework. We talked about technology, 1.2 million tech workers needed by 2030, and the importance of starting at grassroots that Mark mentioned with free TAFE. Ensuring no one's left behind, so important. Thinking about how that we can ensure that people with English-speaking backgrounds, for example, are not left behind through skills-based hiring. We heard from Rachael around the importance of soft skills. That's going to continue to be important. We love the example of technology advancing from Mark with Amazon. And the 6 generations in the workforce. Clearly, one size fits all is not going to work with our strategies. So I guess if there's one thing that we do take away today, we've got to invest. We've got to put time and money into this. We've got to invest in our people, focusing on the hard and soft skills. And, you know, we're not just preparing for it for the future, we're actually shaping it together. So love the talk. Thank you so much. I also love don't let perfection get in the way of progress. Start somewhere. Great little anecdote from you, Sia. Thank you to everybody for putting this together, especially the team with you, with me, Rachael, Lucy, who I know is online. PJ, I think you've done a lot of the heavy lifting for this, so PJ, with you,
Thanks for joining, really appreciate it.
Don't forget, if you haven't already, to download the report. Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on it. Love the recommendation on the sort of research we should be doing next. Rachel and I can connect on that. We also do have a feedback. If you're happy to take a few minutes and provide us some feedback on this event, we'd love to host you again throughout the course of the year on similar topics. And if you do fill the feedback out, feel free to take a goodie bag as a thank you, which is in the back there. That's assuming that you are allowed to accept goodie bags. But yeah, we've absolutely loved having you here. What else? Did I need to do anything else in terms of closing out? I think that was it, wasn't it, Rach? We can close out now. Thank you so much, everybody. Really pleasure to have you.